The restaurant lights were dim, and the streets outside were silent under the soft drizzle that usually comes after midnight. The smell of rain drifted through the open window, mixing with the scent of roasted coffee and baked bread. The tables were mostly empty, except for one near the corner where a man in a faded jacket sat staring at a cup that had gone cold. He didn't look like someone who belonged there. His clothes were plain, his shoes worn, his hands rough. But there was something about the way he sat upright that didn't match the rest. He carried quiet authority hidden beneath simplicity. Anna, the waitress on the night shift, approached with her usual soft smile. "You all right, sir? Need a refill?" He looked up for the first time. His eyes were sharp and thoughtful, like they had seen more than a few storms. He nodded. "Yes, please, just black." She poured it and said gently, "Long day." He smiled faintly. "You could say that I used to eat in places like this every night back when I was trying to forget what mattered." She didn't ask questions. She had learned that late-night customers often spoke more to silence than to people. She only said softly, "Sometimes forgetting hurts more than remembering, doesn't it?" He froze his hand, tightening slightly around the cup. He looked at her long enough that she wondered if she'd said too much. Then he whispered quietly, "You have no idea how true that is." As she cleared a nearby table, a folded piece of paper slipped from her apron. It landed near his chair. He picked it up and handed it back, but his eyes caught the corner where her handwriting showed. The first line read, "To my mum in heaven." He hesitated before saying, "May I?" He pointed to the note. She flushed, embarrassed. "It's nothing, just something I write to her when it's quiet." He nodded slowly and said softly, "Maybe that's why you seem lighter than most people who work at night. You still talk to love instead of losing it." When her shift ended, she found a folded napkin on the counter addressed to her. In it were 10 words written in neat, careful handwriting. "Keep writing to the people you love. They still listen." There was no tip, no name, just those words. The next night, he returned wearing the same jacket, sitting in the same seat. She smiled when she saw him. "Back again," he said quietly. "You make good coffee and better conversation." She laughed. "You sound like a man who's been around expensive coffee." He smiled faintly. "I've had my share for weeks." He came every night at the same time, always alone, always kind, always listening more than speaking, until one evening he didn't come back for 3 days. The restaurant felt emptier than usual. On the 4th night he returned, but something in him had changed. He looked tired but at peace. When he paid the bill, he handed her an envelope and said softly, "Don't open this until tomorrow, and thank you for reminding me what honesty sounds like." When she opened it the next day, she froze. Inside was a check that covered the restaurant's entire year of expenses, and a letter written in the same handwriting. "Anna, I wasn't a poor man. I came here to remember who I used to be before money turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I lost everything that mattered, chasing what didn't. That night when you said forgetting hurts more than remembering, I realized how long I've been living in the wrong direction. This restaurant is now yours. The deed has been transferred to your name. My lawyer will confirm it today. You deserve a place built on kindness, not profit. Use it to build what I lost: humanity. Thank you for seeing me when no one else dared to. I haven't smiled in years until you reminded me what warmth feels like. I hope this place becomes a home for everyone who needs to feel seen." When she finished reading, she sat on the floor crying, holding the letter to her chest. The next morning, men in suits arrived with legal papers confirming the truth. The billionaire, who had once owned a global empire, had given her his restaurant. That night, the sign outside glowed with new letters painted by her own hand. "The listening room," and beneath it, in small gold writing, "In memory of those who found themselves when someone saw them first." Weeks passed and the listening room became the most visited restaurant in the city, but not for its food. It became known for its warmth, for the way people walked in with heavy hearts and left feeling lighter. The tables were always full, yet somehow the place never felt loud. Only alive. Anna ran it the same way she had lived, simply and sincerely. She greeted every guest with the same care she once gave to the quiet man in the faded jacket. The one she now knew had been Charles Mason, the billionaire who had vanished from the world's eye 2 years ago when his company collapsed under scandal. People said he had disappeared to escape shame. But she now knew the truth. He had been searching for peace one night as the last. Customers left. Anna stayed behind, cleaning tables. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped inside wearing a black coat and carrying a folder. She spoke softly. "Miss Anna Taylor." "My name is Laura Mason. I'm Charles's daughter." Anna froze. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same calm eyes, the same stillness. Laura smiled gently. "I hope I'm not intruding." Anna shook her head. "No, please come in." Laura looked around the restaurant, her voice quiet. "This place looks exactly like one my father used to. Take me to when I was little." She placed the folder on the counter. "He wanted you to have this." She pushed it toward her. Anna opened it slowly. Inside were legal papers, but also another letter in the same familiar handwriting. "Anna, if you're reading. This, I'm gone, but don't let sorrow replace what we built. I've left you not just this restaurant, but my foundation. The Mason Trust will now be under your care. Use it to give second chances to those who lost theirs. People like me who forgot who they were." Her eyes blurred as she kept reading. "I've written one more letter, but it's not for you, it's for my daughter. I trust you to give it to her when the time feels right. She'll know what it means when she's ready." Anna looked up. At Laura, uncertain. "He left something for you." Laura smiled faintly. "I thought he might." She took the smaller sealed envelope, her hands trembling as she opened it. Her lips quivered as she read, "My little girl, I spent years teaching you how to win, but never how to be happy. I was so busy chasing more that I forgot what enough felt like. You once told me you missed the father who used to stop by the park for ice cream. I thought I could buy back that time. I was wrong. Kindness is the only thing that multiplies when shared. Remember that if you ever wonder where I went, I found myself in a small diner where a waitress reminded me that love doesn't die. It only waits to be noticed again." Tears rolled down Laura's cheeks. She folded the letter and whispered, "He was still the man I hoped he'd be." Anna reached out, touching her hand softly. He never stopped being that man. He just needed someone to see him again. From that day forward, Laura visited the listening room often, not as an heiress but as a volunteer, helping Anna feed the homeless on weekends. They turned the upstairs floor into a shelter for struggling single mothers and a small library filled with letters and journals people left behind. Each one carried a story of loss and rediscovery. Years later, when people entered the restaurant, they always noticed a framed letter hanging behind the counter, the one Charles had written to Anna. It read, "Kindness doesn't heal the world by shouting. It heals it by listening." Anna would smile every time someone asked who wrote it. She'd point toward the corner table by the window and say, "Just a man who finally remembered who he was," and every night after closing, she'd pour a cup of coffee for that table, let the steam rise and whisper softly, "You kept your promise, Charles. You built something that will never fade." Years passed, and the listening room grew into more than a restaurant. It became a living heartbeat in the middle of the city, a place where broken people found belonging and where strangers became family. Its walls carried stories of laughter, tears, forgiveness, and the kind of quiet healing that never made headlines, but changed lives all the same. Anna grew older, but her energy never dimmed. Her father had long recovered. Her bills were gone, and she had built something that didn't belong to her alone anymore. The people who came through her doors carried their own storms, and she let them rest there, even if just for a meal. Laura Mason became her closest companion. They worked side by side, not as owner and worker, but as two women bound by a shared promise to continue what Charles had started. On weekends, they hosted free dinners for veterans and artists. On holidays, the restaurant stayed open for anyone who had no one else to share a meal with. Every corner of the restaurant told a story. The wall near the entrance displayed handwritten notes left by visitors. People wrote secrets, confessions, apologies, hopes. One note read, "I came here planning to end everything until someone smiled at me." Another said, "This food didn't fill my stomach, it filled something missing inside me." Anna kept every single one tucked into a leather book she called the Listening Ledger One. Quiet evening after closing, Laura found Anna sitting by the same window seat where Charles once sat. A candle flickered between them as they shared tea. Laura smiled. "You know he'd be proud, right?" Anna looked out at the streetlights and said softly, "I don't know if he'd be proud, but I think he'd be at peace." Laura nodded, resting her chin on her hand. "He used to tell me that peace wasn't silence, it was the sound of forgiveness." She smiled gently. "And this place is full of it," Anna replied. "That's because we never stopped listening." Time moved gently after that. The city changed around them new. Towers rose, neon lights filled the skyline. But the listening room stayed exactly as it was. Warm light wooden floors, the smell of coffee at all hours, and that familiar corner table by the window, where one cup of coffee was always poured, but never touched. Then one morning a young man entered wearing a worn backpack and tired eyes. He looked around nervously before saying softly, "My mom said, if I ever got lost, I should come here. She said, it's where people find themselves." Anna smiled warmly. "Your mom sounds like someone I'd like to meet." He hesitated, pulling a folded letter from his pocket. "She said to give you this." The handwriting made her heart stop. It was Charles's. The paper yellowed with age, but the words were clear. "If someone ever walks in holding this letter, please take care of them the way you took care of me. Remind them they matter, even when the world forgets to say so." Anna looked up at the boy, eyes wide. "Where did you get this?" he said quietly. "My mum found it years ago in a box from an estate sale. She told me the man who wrote it was someone who changed lives. She said this place was magic." Her throat tightened as she whispered, "It isn't magic, it's kindness." She handed him a warm plate of food and said, "Sit. Anywhere you like, you're home now." That night after everyone left, she sat in the corner chair holding the old letter close. Tears slipped down her face, but she was smiling because in that moment she realized that Charles's promise had lived far beyond both of them. It had found its way into new hands, new hearts, and new beginnings, and as the candle flickered beside her, she whispered into the quiet air, "Thank you, Charles. You taught me that one act of grace can echo through generations, forever." Decades later, the listening room stood proudly on the same quiet street, now surrounded by tall glass buildings and neon signs that blinked through the night. Yet despite the changing city, the restaurant looked exactly the same. The same. Golden light glowed through the windows. The same gentle music played, and the same warmth wrapped around everyone who stepped inside like a familiar embrace. Anna's hair had turned silver, but her eyes still carried that same steady kindness. She had become something of a legend, though she never liked that word. To her, she was just a waitress who never stopped listening. The restaurant had grown under her care, but it had never lost its heart. Laura had turned the Mason Trust into a global foundation. Their work funded homes for children, art programs for refugees, and small cafes in struggling neighborhoods. Each one carried a plaque at the entrance that read, "Inspired by the listening room, where every soul deserves to be heard." Every year, people from all over the world came to see the original restaurant. Some came to eat, some came to leave notes, and some came to sit in silence by the window table where the story began. That seat was never taken. No one dared to touch the cup of coffee that sat there each day, freshly poured for a man who had once been lost but found himself in a moment of kindness. One rainy evening, Anna sat by that window with Laura, watching the reflections of headlights ripple across the wet pavement. Laura smiled softly. "Do you ever think he knew how far this would go?" Anna shook her head. "He didn't plan it. He just gave what he could. That's how good things begin." Quietly, a little girl approached their table holding a small notebook. She couldn't have been more than 9. Her mother smiled apologetically. "She wanted to ask you something," Anna smiled warmly, bending down. "What is it, sweetheart?" the girl said shyly. "My teacher told us about the man who was rich but came here pretending to be poor. Is it true that you changed his life?" Anna looked at her for a long moment before answering. "No, honey, he changed his own. I just reminded him that he still could." The girl nodded, then handed her a drawing. It was a picture of the restaurant with words, scribbled in a child's handwriting, "A place where hearts talk louder than words." Anna smiled through misty eyes. It's perfect. Years passed and time carried them both gently toward its quiet end. Laura eventually took over running the restaurant, while Anna became its spirit always present, even when her body began to slow. On her final evening, she asked to sit by the window one last time. The staff gathered around as she said softly, "You all know the rule. Listen more than you speak. That's how you save people even if they never tell you you did." The lights dimmed. The rain outside turned soft and rhythmic, and she whispered her last words, barely audible. "Make sure the coffee's always warm for him." When Anna passed away, the city mourned. Flags of the Mason Foundation flew low, and people left flowers outside the restaurant for days. After her funeral, Laura sat in the empty restaurant staring at the candle flickering beside the untouched cup. She whispered quietly, "You did it, Anna." You turned listening into love. Years later, when Laura grew old, she wrote a book titled The Quiet Kindness and dedicated it to her father and to the waitress who saved him. It became a guide for generations of dreamers, leaders, and wanderers who had forgotten the value of simply being human. And long after both women were gone, the listening room still stood. The coffee cup by the window still steamed every morning, and the candle still flickered through the night. A sign above the door now. "Read where stories are healed, one word at a time." People from everywhere came to sit inside. Some left letters, some cried, some smiled, but every single one left lighter than when they arrived, because kindness had found its permanent home there, carried forever by a waitress who listened and a billionaire who finally learned how to be heard. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.